I'm Ari Redboard, and this is TRM Talks. I am Global Head of Policy at TRM Labs. At TRM, we provide blockchain intelligence software to support law enforcement investigations and to help financial institutions and cryptocurrency businesses mitigate financial crime risk within the emerging digital asset economy. Prior to joining TRM, I spent 15 years in the U.S. federal government, first as a prosecutor at the Department of Justice, and then as a Treasury Department official, where I worked to safeguard the financial system against terrorist financiers, weapons of mass destruction proliferators, drug kingpins, and other rogue actors. On TRM Talks, I sit down with business leaders, policymakers, investigators, and friends from across the crypto ecosystem who are working to build a safer financial system. On today's TRM Talks, I sit down with Global Head of Policy, Yaya Fanusie of Aleo. But first, inside the lab, where I share data-driven insights from our blockchain intelligence team. On today's Inside the Lab, we unpack a recent TRM blog post, The Imitation Game. Following Garantex's takedown, are these high-risk exchanges copying its playbook? After the dismantling of high-risk exchange Garantex, TRM observed a wave of exchanges that appeared to be mirroring its behavior. Platforms like ABCX and AEXBit have surfaced with nearly identical UIs, overlapping wallet flows, and co-spending activity. Strong signals they may share infrastructure or operators with the original entity. These mimicry tactics are a defensive playbook. Rebrand, spin up clones, reuse code, and try to maintain continuity in user access while evading enforcement. But on-chain analytics exposes the links, wallet co-spending, shared transactional patterns, and reuse of routing structures leave traceable trails. This case underscores how high-risk exchanges adapt fast, but their strategies are rarely unique. The path to resilience is not anonymity, it's visibility, behavioral monitoring, and the ability to detect imitation. And now, I am joined by Yaya Fanusie. Today, I am here with my friend and the Global Head of Policy at the Aleo Network, Yaya Fanusie. Yaya, thank you so much for joining TRM Talks.
Ari, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to team up with you.
Tell me about your journey. I would love to sort of really dig into your background. Frankly, you have one of the most interesting backgrounds of anyone I know. And now at Aleo, going back, you were a math teacher.
Oh,
which
wow.
I love that. I'm going back.
You want to go way
You were a math
back.
teacher, but I feel like that's so, to me, I just feel like that's part of that really interesting story to technology.
Yeah, well, let me say, and I still say to this day, my 3 years teaching in Washington, D.C., teaching at a public charter high school. I first taught ninth grade, and then I taught like 11th and 12th, algebra, pre-algebra, algebra 2, et cetera. That was the toughest job I have ever had. And that goes, we could talk about my journey to the CIA, deploying to Afghanistan for 3 months. Nothing beats how tough that job was of teaching, the job of a teacher.
And is it just the responsibility that you felt that was on your shoulders? Tell me about why was that so hard?
The thing about teaching high school especially, but probably any teacher, you are always on. I mean, on in terms of you are in front of the class, even when you're not teaching, in between classes, you're on as a teacher, right? You're always turned on, interacting with students. Now, I love teaching. The flip side is it was probably the most fun I've ever had day to day because I was able to be creative. I have a little creative background. So we used to have Freestyle Fridays in my homeroom class where I would get the students to freestyle, do rap freestyles about math. So I love the creativity. I love the interacting with students, but the stress of always having to be on, dealing with managing discipline. I had discipline issues, especially when I taught ninth graders, so ninth graders, probably the toughest age group.
Yes.
They don't care as much.
I have one.
Yes.
Yes, I know.
Yes. We're seniors. It's like they're on autopilot. I mean, they know they need to graduate. And just the around the clock. So compare, you take your work home with you. You're working on the weekends to prepare for the next week. Compare that to the CIA, where if you take your work home with you, you go to jail, right? so you may have a tough day at work, but then you leave and it's like you're totally off. You're not always on like you are when you're a teacher. Yeah. I would actually say teaching math led me to the CIA. I actually went to graduate school for international affairs. So I was in the international affairs arena with a concentration on finance. But something happened to me in my young days. I didn't have a lot of work experience. And I think when I graduated, I was a little unsure what I wanted to do. So my first job out of graduate school was I was a budget analyst at the DC public school system. And I supervised the finances or the budgets of 27 schools and different offices. And then I was doing some volunteer work in Harlem where I was, tutoring and doing some like once a week teaching at this school. And I started to get this teaching bug. And so I was like, you know what, why don't I maybe try to get into educational administration? So I'm working as a budget analyst. And then I had a friend who started working at this charter school. And I said, you know what, I never had formal teaching experience. Why don't I do this teaching? And I went in, I wanted to teach economics, honestly. And then the principal was like, oh, you've taken calculus? You're our new math teacher. I'm like, well, I wasn't a math major. I just took math. And so I wound up teaching. So I was teaching and I said, you know what? This is not what I thought it would be. And I thought maybe I wanted to become a principal or assistant principal. That's why I went into teaching. I was like, oh, maybe that's the path. And then I was like, this job is just it's not for me. The stress, it's not. So I basically started thinking, why don't I go back to what I was trained in, foreign policy, international affairs. So yes, I was a math teacher and I sent in an application. This is like 2003, I guess it would have been. I applied to the CIA. Now I had all of this experience. I had overseas travel. I had done research. I'd done all this stuff. And I applied and it took me, a year. But after those 3 years, I went roughly to the CIA after, like I said, I had a gap job doing something else.
This is just extraordinary. I mean, to me, you're a high school math teacher, and then you move to a counterterrorism role in really probably the most important time in human history to have counterterrorism experts in the world.
To clarify, so I was an economics major in undergraduate. So I had an econ background. I had done a lot of travel. I spent some time in Africa. I did this research. I went to Zimbabwe. This is in the 90s, before the economy had collapsed. And I did a summer research project that I created myself in Zimbabwe, spent time in rural Zimbabwe, I was a Fulbright scholar after college. I spent time in Ghana. So I was actually hired as an economic analyst focusing on Africa. And I was focusing on issues around energy, corruption, political economy. So I wasn't in the counterterrorism world. But when I was going through my training, it was 2005, and I showed up at work one day, and on the screen was this bombing that had happened in London. This was July 7th, 2005. And I had a friend in the Counterterrorism Center, CTC, at CIA, and I had a friend who was always saying, oh, you should jump to CT work. I know you're doing this economic stuff, jump to CT. And long story short, I started to think about other ways to navigate my career. And I eventually became a counterterrorism analyst and joined the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC.
I would never ask you to dig too deep into that experience, but I would just say you mentioned travel to Afghanistan. Would love to hear more about that if you're able to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can share, at a very high level. I mean, a lot of analysts during that time. So this is in the thick of war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and there were a lot of people going over analysts like myself. I was an analyst, right? I was in the Directorate of Intelligence doing analysis to provide analytic support. So, I was spent three months, a 3-month TDY, they call it, providing analytic support to senior U.S. military officials. I was able to brief them on sort of what was going on. And it was an experience that really impacted me because obviously I'd never been in a war zone before. Coming back and seeing, I think what I would say overall about that experience and my intel experience in general, you see how foreign policy is made. You see how, I think you sort of see how, I don't want to say how the world works, but when I came back, this is a good example. It's like there was a big disconnect. And I think maybe a lot of people, I only went for 3 months, right? Imagine, folks that are in the military that are actually there for a year-long tour or more. I came back and it was so clear that there was this disconnect between being in a war zone where you have people fighting, dying, and at one point, the Taliban doing rocket attacks, et cetera, and coming back and it's like, there was no awareness or it seemed like there was no awareness, except maybe if you watch the news a little bit. So that's, I think, to me, made national security very real in a way that has always stuck with me because it's very easy to get detached for what's happening around the world.
It's so beautifully said. What was next in terms of that career journey?
Like I said, I jumped to CT work. So even though I started out as an economic analyst, I then went and I was doing CT. None of it was financial related at all, for the most part. It was just, hey, guys are plotting, let's try to stop them, or let's find out who's plotting, et cetera. What was next for me was I started working with a consulting firm that was doing something called financial asset recovery. And what it was is we were doing an investigation to locate kleptocratic assets. So these are assets stolen by a corrupt regime, hidden around the world, shell companies, offshore accounts, luxury items, mansions, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a totally non-governmental. I mean, it was, we weren't in government, and it was a financial investigation. And I learned actually through that work after leaving government. I was fresh out of government. I learned a lot about how folks try to hide their money, how they launder funds. And I was part of a team, and we did it was a full financial investigation, open source in the sense. I mean, we did have some connections, but it was, it wasn't government, none of it was classified. And that is where I think I got bitten by the counter illicit finance bug. And this was this was before open source Intel was big. This was when it was like, okay, what are the tools that are out there so you can try to look at property records, look at business registries, and understand the typologies around money laundering. That's what got me into the illicit finance realm. And from there, if I can jump ahead to answer your question in terms of how it fits to crypto, that contract ended, and I was hired at a think tank to help stand up this new center called the Center on Sanctions and Illicit Finance at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And this was 2015. I think I heard of Bitcoin maybe a little bit. And I'm in this new role, and people are sort of saying, oh, you know what, this Bitcoin thing, terrorists might use it. And as an analyst, I'm like, okay, let's look at this question. Like, let's try to analyze this. What's the evidence? How can I see this? Is this something that people are just saying, or are they really doing it? And 2015, that was in my head, because I thought, any scammer could say that they're ISIS, send me Bitcoin. How do you know that that's really ISIS from a public standpoint? So a year later in 2016, I'll never forget it because it sort of set off where my career has gone. So 2016, the summer, I see this media report, and it says that there's a terrorist group that is fundraising Bitcoin. And so I first saw it and I said, oh, okay, this is probably some hype, some journalists, making some analytic leaps, I don't know if it's true. So I was about to go to lunch, and I spoke to my interns and I said, you know what, can you look into this? It's probably nothing, but let's check it out and talk to me when I come back from lunch. So come back, and my two interns who were younger than me, Gen Z, they were, undergrads, they researched it a little bit, and they saw that there was this social media account, which we were pretty, confident was, it was an illicit account. Twitter kept trying to, ban it, and they kept coming back. And they showed me the QR code, and the QR code led to blockchain.info, and it was the wallet that this group was fundraising. And so they showed it to me. It went right to it, and I said, wait a second. So this is like the address that they're raising funds, and they're on social media, and I can look at it. And then we dig deeper, and we saw that there were 2 transactions, and it hit me. I was like, wait a second. If this is legit, this is a terrorist funding campaign, and we can see the transactions, we can do analysis. This is not like what you would have dealt with Al-Qaeda terrorist financing, 5-10 years ago, where it's all through banks and it's hidden through hawalas, and how are you going to track it publicly? That was a fundraising campaign that we researched, we wrote a report on, and I still say to this day that was the first publicly verifiable terrorist use of crypto that we could, the public could verify and look at it. So it was I think a key moment that led to my looking at crypto from an illicit finance perspective, but then getting more into this technology.
So from there, was that your sort of aha moment where this technology is extraordinary, but it could also be used by bad actors?
No, I think it came later. My aha moment was in 2017 when we started to see a different policy issue and a different development in the technology, which was Russia started investing or thinking about using blockchain technology for its banks. We also saw Iran building a blockchain research center at the MIT of Iran. These were things, this is public stuff that I started to see. And we started to hear conversations, Russia, Iran, even later, Venezuela, which is in the news now, right, was thinking about crypto as a sanctions evasion tool. And the issue for me there was, okay, so other nation states are thinking about this technology. Now, maybe they don't want to use Bitcoin. I mean, maybe they will, but they're strategically thinking about how can we build a different architecture to use as an alternative to the traditional payment system to SWIFT. Now, were they successful right away? No, but that opened to me. That was key. That was, this technology does unlock something. It unlocks a more advanced or potentially more efficient way to do finance, and that maybe this is something I should think about, not just try to stop bad actors from raising funds and laundering, but think about how this technology could be used as the architecture for the future financial system.
What's amazing and why that is so prescient is if you ask me what was sort of the latter half of 2025 and what's going to be the story in this space in 2026, I would tell you infrastructure by nation state actors, right? There will be fewer days of these sort of one-off transactions and more using cryptocurrency infrastructure for sanctions evasion and other illicit activity. It's also just the growth of the ecosystem, right? Crypto infrastructure, if blockchains are going to be financial rails, they're going to be overwhelmingly used for good, as you know, but then we're also going to see bad actors take advantage of them.
That's a good segue to where we are now and probably why I'm at Aleo, if I could, bring the through line to that, which is my research in a think tank capacity. At one point, I had been looking at China's CBDC, China's central bank digital currency. I wrote a couple of reports co-authored with a great colleague, Emily Chin, where we looked at this whole CBDC of China, what was it about? And the second report, it's called The Programmable State. I reached a conclusion after doing this research, and I realized that there's going to have to be advancements in privacy preservation in our financial sector, because the technology is getting to a place where the data is going to be more apparent, data is going to be used. So there are going to have to be some ways to protect that data and preserve privacy around that data. And I started to think that in the US, there's going to have to be some more attention on digital financial privacy. The more your economy gets digitized, the more you're doing everything digital, the more data is exposed. And just as a corollary to that, if we're going to have a free society protecting liberties, there's going to have to be some way to protect privacy.
That is incredibly cool through line, and that's a great segue into Aleo. Talk through a little bit more about what you're building there.
Well, I think the best way to describe Aleo and what it is, think of Aleo as being an improvement upon Zcash. So Zcash is a crypto where the breakthrough there was the ability to make the transactions confidential. So they're not on the public blockchain. I mean, of course, they could be, shielded and unshielded, but that was sort of the breakthrough. But the thing is, Zcash is it's kind of like Bitcoin. It's like a private Bitcoin. Ethereum, as everyone knows, brings programmability. But Ethereum, like Bitcoin, is publicly transparent, right? So you can build all types of computations, smart contracts, but those smart contracts are public for everyone to see. Aleo is programmable and the transactions are private. So Aleo is a breakthrough in that now you have private programmability, and that brings some functionality. Now you can set parameters, and the blockchain itself is really its base. It's built for zero knowledge proofs, right? So ZKPs, zero knowledge proofs, are sort of the element in the blockchain that allows you to have a bunch of computational data and confirm that it happened, but you don't store the computation on the chain. So Aleo it gives you the ability to not only make transactions private, but now you can also build in parameters. You could build in risk management because you have a ZKP, and all of that could be built on the chain. So it's a layer one ZKP blockchain.
I get asked all the time about isn't what you do counter to privacy? And I say it's actually quite the opposite. I am a privacy maxi. We need to be able to transact privately on blockchains. But at the same time, we can't allow North Korea to use mixers at scale, to use privacy-enabled cryptocurrencies or blockchains at scale. How do you think about that push and pull?
Yeah, it's very real. Now the question is, all right, so how can we enable the freest, movement of funds? How do we do that and then still have safeguards? And I think from my perspective, you think of Aleo as building blocks. When policymakers are thinking about, okay, so how do we stop bad actors from exploiting this technology or exploiting privacy preserving tools? The answer is there's not a one note, one word, or one sentence answer for how you stop it. The answer is more in, well, what are we going to build as a financial sector, as a private sector? What are we going to build as a country or as a society that preserves privacy and mitigates risk or makes it difficult for illicit actors to exploit? With Aleo, you have an infrastructure where others can build, it's a decentralized blockchain. So the Aleo network is like any other, it's a decentralized network. There's not a company that can control it. I mean, the Aleo Network Foundation is a foundation that supervises the ecosystem, right? And we're familiar with that concept. But what we do is we support or encourage people building capacity on the blockchain. So here's a perfect example: stablecoins. Stablecoins are now, obviously, with Genius passing, are the thing, and there's going to be a boom in stablecoins. But what's one of the most overlooked issue with stablecoins is that they're all transparent, like all public blockchains, right? They're on public blockchains. So what Aleo allows you to do, or allows an issuer to do, is to generate a token connected to your stablecoin, which, that public stablecoin, to have a new token that can have private features. So because it's if you issue it on the Aleo network, you can have that stablecoin now be private. And the key is that because we're in a zero knowledge proof environment, you can actually build in screening. You can build in the things that you would have as a stablecoin issuer, but in a private environment because it's programmable. So you can build safeguards. You can build risk mitigation on top of the network.
That's fantastic. I think I'm literally going to go from the most technical, operational possible part of this conversation to zoom you out for a moment. Talk me through, what do you see as the policy landscape today? You feel free to dive into market structure for a moment.
Even before you get to market structure, right? Genius Act implementation. So now Genius is being implemented. All the regulatory bodies are coming up with actual rules. And there's one thing that I don't think the people are thinking about, because everyone was happy when Genius got passed. Obviously, the issuers are happy, right? But here's a conundrum. There are rules that financial regulators are going to be judging issuers by. And one of the rules, like if you're under the oversight of the OCC, for example, you have to ensure that your customers' data, their PII, their personal identifiable information, identity information, right, is hidden. And a question arises, and I know this is a real question amongst regulators. When does all of this transaction information, or even a little bit of it, when does it become PII? Because if I'm using a stablecoin and then there's attribution around me, or anyone can easily point to my wallet and figure out it's me and it's being handled by a financial institution, how can that financial institution protect it? I think that when the OCC comes out with rulemaking, I think they're going to put some sort of stipulation that financial institutions or the issuer who are dealing with the stablecoin are going to have some sort of privacy option. I think that's actually going to come out in rulemaking. I mean, maybe it'll be a question in rulemaking, how should that be dealt with? I don't think people have even thought about that.
It's extraordinary. And that's why privacy is going to be part of every conversation. I interviewed Tyler Williams on Friday at an event, and I asked him basically two things, tell me about, how you're working on Genius implementation, at least to the extent that you can share. And he said, obviously, sort of working very hard. Specifically, would not put a date on sort of when they'd have stuff out. But no, I think you nailed it. I think privacy is going to be a huge part of this. And I think anti-money laundering will be a huge part of it. And I think the intersection is going to be really, really interesting. This has been an incredible conversation, and I knew it would be. I'm so glad you were willing to come on. When you are not working on, to me, like the toughest but most important issues in crypto, that intersection between national security and privacy, what do you do for fun, Yaya?
Two parts. So first I'll do there's the physical, and then there's like the sort of the mental and emotional and creative. So physical, I'll share. I usually don't talk about this too much in public, but hey, you asked. I recently started practicing judo. It's funny because judo is less popular in the United States compared to around the world. Like here in the United States, everyone knows more BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's very popular. But around the world, judo is much more popular. And I got the opportunity once to go to, actually, you were with me, to Japan. We went to the FATA.
Amazing.
What you didn't know is that's right when I was getting into judo.
No, so you've been really at it for a couple of years then. That was a couple of years ago. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been like, 2 plus 2.5 or almost 3 years almost. But I was only into it like for a month. or two.
Okay.
And my sensei, our instructor, he was like, "Oh, you should go to the Kodokan, which is
Okay.
the birthplace of judo in Japan, in
Wow.
Tokyo." And so I went, and it's so funny because I had no idea. Like, I was like, okay, I guess I'll go. And it's so respected around the world. Most judokas, people who practice judo, have never been to the Kodokan.
Yeah.
And I was able to go and actually watch a, live like competition. And now I'm like, I can't believe, now that I've been here a lot, I can't believe I went to the Kodokan.
Is it a center or a stadium? I'm picturing the Jedi Temple,
right.
which I know is totally off,
it is a
but
building.
like that's what's in my head.
Yeah, it's a building. Or at least it's a few floors in a building, but the center is like the dojo, which is like the area. It's a huge area where people have competition, and then there are seatings. But it's very famous. As you get into judo, you're like you recognize the Kodokan, like where you see it in videos. So I love judo. And the other thing is, I alluded to this. I've always been creative. I used to do photography in high school. I used to rap poetry in college. And that later evolved into my work doing podcasting myself. But my true, if you really were to say, like, what's my real hobby right now, is I produced a podcast a couple of years ago called the Jabari Lincoln Files. And the Jabari Lincoln Files is a spy thriller podcast where the protagonist is a CIA financial analyst, intel analyst. And it's a spy thriller audio drama in the form of a podcast. So that is, and I thought it went pretty well, and I'm working on season 2 right now.
It's really extraordinary. And I would just tell everyone there, this is an absolute must listen.
Oh.
When I first started listening, the thing that struck me the most is like, I'm picturing you, obviously, right? It is really extraordinary, and congratulations on it. You've now mentioned freestyling once and rap. Is there any way that I could get you to like a couple bars for the TRM Talks audience? Just for the audience, this is unrehearsed, never done before. TRM Talks first, but we thought this would be a little fun. And since we're talking about building a new financial system, thought a little instrumental from My Shot from Hamilton might be something to get us in the mood.
Yeah, pull out the sword with red board. I'm here, never bored. I'm coming this. Yes, I never snored. Fanusie and airy on the zone. I'm here with a microphone. Man, your minds are blown. A new financial system. Listen, my rhymes will glisten. You don't understand who is this or who is listening. You need privacy. Who is he? Fanusie, not Fanusie. Your rhymes are not too lousy. I'm coming like a mousey, quiet because it's preserved in the privacy. I got my zero knowledge words. ZKP, you can't see me. I'm not down with OPP. I'm down with ZKP because y'all know me. Who's he? Fanusie, like Bruce Lee. I'm kicking it so loosely. That's an old rhyme from back in my days at Berkeley. Don't hurt me. Ooh, my rhymes to try to stay worthy. Ari, if you give out a word, I will deservingly give it back to you. Give me another word to rhyme about. I'll keep freestyling and we can go all out. What's the word?
TRM Talks,
TRM.
not throwing away our shot.
He said TRM Talks, never will stop. He's got one shot. The rhymes go pop, but we're not pop. We are straight underground. Every word we say is profound. You love each sound. I'm another round, like Ali. Who's coming to? It's me and Ari or Ari. Yeah, you better get the name right. He kicks you out of sight. My man has some light. This is my good day and my good night. All fist for the top of the dome.
Awesome. That was unbelievable.
I freestyle.
Dude, you are so talented. That is crazy.
Thank God. This is just like, I've loved creativity.
Literal mic drop from Yaya Fanusie. Yaya, like, you are the man. And that was so cool. That was absolutely awesome. I think everyone knows I've loved like 100 or 100 plus now TRM Talks, but this may have been truly my favorite. And it was deeply personal and it was so much fun. And I think what's really extraordinary is that you think about Yaya's background, and we got into him being a math teacher at a charter school in DC, going right to a counterterrorism role at CIA, spent time in Afghanistan, trade associations in the crypto industry, and now at Aleo, really working on those incredibly important connections between privacy and security. But it was the freestyling, right? I mean, I was so blown away, and he's so humble. And I said this to him afterwards, and I think he just kind of nodded. But the reality is, like, to be able to have your head moving that fast and your mind moving that fast, and yet have the creativity to drop those bars and really sort of make it happen. And I think it speaks to him as a person, creative, talented, incredibly smart, and really just extraordinary. So really blown away by the entire episode. You can hear it in my voice probably now because I was just so excited. It's podcast magic when something like that happens, what happened just now in terms of the freestyling. So hopefully we can have more guests freestyle, or maybe I can learn to rap better. Anyway, really extraordinary and honored to have Yaya on the show and really to drop the mic today. On the next TRM Talks, I sit down with the head of legal and compliance for DBS Bank, Chi Kin Lam. If you love the show, leave a review wherever you're listening to it. Follow us on LinkedIn to subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Roundup, to get the latest news on crypto regulation, compliance, and investigations.
TRM Talks is brought to you by TRM Labs, the leading provider of blockchain intelligence and anti-money laundering software. This episode was produced in partnership with Voltage Productions. The music for this show was provided by Ecolix.
Now, let's get back to building.